Recently, I have been reading about the connection between diet and mental health. It's no secret that highly processed foods are bad for us, but studies show that they are linked to hyperactivity, anxiety, and even depression. Today, I want to share 4 meals that take 20 minutes or less hands-on time and not only nourish our bodies, but also bring all of the cozy comforts of the season. There is just something about the fall. Cooler weather, turning leaves, and crisp air leave me longing for cozy, filling meals and warm, fresh breads. Although I will say I don't always nail the advanced planning to make it all happen. I'll share a little bit more about that with you later on ways to deliver fresh pasta, long fermented sourdough, and beautiful pastries when time is short. But first, I want to show you what type of meals I'm cooking up in the kitchen today. If you've been around my channel for long, you know I love a good remake of leftovers. Not only does it reduce cooking time, but it also reduces cost and waste. Today I'm remaking a leftover rotisserie chicken into chicken piccata. This recipe calls for chicken breast, battered and fried, and while I want to get that texture, I decided to get creative and cube up and lightly dredge my chicken to warm it up and also give it that traditional piccata texture. Aside from the fact that I was able to reuse some leftovers and save some money in that regard, it was also super helpful because I was able to cut the chicken into bite-sized chunks. That meant that I got to spend my meal eating instead of chopping up chicken for my crew of 5 littles. Now, the secret to getting the perfect texture is to have a super hot skillet, and once you place the chicken in initially, let it set before you flip it over. My personal favorite for this is cast iron. This is a huge one. I use it for all sorts of vegetables and things that I actually love to roast off in the oven, but it came in really handy here with the chicken because I was able to spread it all out on the bottom, let it set, and then once that crispy crust had finished, I was able to turn it over and again, give everything the space it needed to finish cooking. Here's a little shot in the middle of the process. I still had a couple more sides to go, but as the chicken was finishing up, the timer went off on my oven to let me know that the bread was done. Now, anytime you're baking bread, you want to make sure that you're not just going by your oven timer because every kitchen is different. The humidity and altitude and everything can change those. So make sure to take an instant read thermometer and get an internal temperature to make sure that you have got it all the way done on the inside. The last thing you want is for a delicious loaf of bread to still be gummy, and that is exactly what you avoid when you make sure you have the correct temperature. Now, as the bread was cooling off, I went ahead and started the sauce in the pan. This comes together really fast with just a few basic ingredients, and I will make sure to link the recipe for you down below that I used as my inspiration. I did not follow it specifically because I made that change to go with my rotisserie chicken instead of a chicken breast, but it'll give you the general idea on the ingredients. Now, I used the remainder of a bottle of wine that I had in the refrigerator to go ahead and deglaze the pan, as well as some chicken stock. That wine is optional, so don't feel like that's something that you have to go grab. And while the sauce reduced down, I went ahead and put in my pasta. I should have put this in just a little bit earlier because I didn't really realize just how quickly the sauce was going to come together. And I was using pasta from frozen, so it did take my water that was at a full boil down and it needed to warm up again. So just depending on what pasta you're using, you might want to start your pasta a little bit before or in advance of when you start your sauce. Now, just as a tip, before you go ahead and drain your pasta, make sure you pull off some pasta water so you can use it to incorporate into your sauce and make sure everything comes together really beautifully. I did that off camera, and I always wonder when I do that if others know that it's such an important step. So I wanted to make sure that I mentioned it here for you. After the sauce had reduced on the stove, I added some heavy cream to my mixture to give it that rich, creamy texture that piccata is known for. I'm also going to add in some capers here. Now, this does impart kind of a strong flavor, so you might want to be a little bit light-handed with those, just depending on the flavor and the texture profiles of what your family enjoys. We added quite a few. The little guy there with the bottle in his hand likes to eat them plain, so this was something that he really enjoyed. The little ones might have wished we went a little bit lighter. So again, you can always add more once it's on your plate if you don't want to add them all into the sauce, or you could skip them all together. While bread is optional, a warm, comforting meal like this calls for sourdough for me. Although I can make it from scratch, it does take time, and on this specific day, time was something that was in short supply. Thankfully, I had a beautiful loaf from Wild Grain in the freezer, so this loaf of long fermented sourdough only took 18 minutes directly from frozen straight on my rack. I'm sure some of you are asking, what is Wild Grain? So I'm going to take just a minute to tell you more, as they just so happen to be the sponsor of today's video. Wild Grain is the first ever bake from scratch, fully customizable subscription box for sourdough breads, fresh pasta, which is what we're using for this specific recipe, and artisanal pastries. Basically, they deliver the benefits of sourdough without the work. Every item they offer goes from freezer to table in 25 minutes or less, and they even offer boxes for those specific dietary restrictions like plant-based or even gluten-free, which is made in a 100% fully gluten-free facility. Basically, it's healthy fast food. If you want to try out Wild Grains today, make sure to use my link in the description and the code HOMETOWN to save $30 off your first box. Plus, you'll get free croissants with every order. And trust me, you won't be disappointed. Now, on to our next meal, which happens to be a weekly favorite around here, which is Detroit-style pizza. Now, if you are familiar with Detroit style, you know what's so great about it. It has really crunchy, amazing edges, and the cheese goes all the way to the outside of the crust. We have tried several different crusts over the years, and this is the one that seems to be the family favorite. So I want to show you really quickly how we put it together. In my brain, before I first ever made a pizza crust, it was a big deal, but it's really not at all. I am using freshly milled wheat flour here, but you can just use regular bread flour if you want it really chewy or all-purpose, whatever you have on hand. I often use a combination of both, which is exactly what I'm doing today. It gives the wonderful health benefits of a whole grain, freshly ground flour, but the springiness and chewiness that comes along with a pre-processed flour. So this is organic bread flour going in, and I really love the way this turns out, combining both of the textures together. This dough takes about 3 minutes initially, and then you let it rest for 10 minutes for all of the gluten structure and the flour to really get fully hydrated. Then you just knead it until it's smooth. I did all of that in my Anchor mixer, popped the lid on, and let it set for a couple hours while I took my little one up for her nap. So as you can see, that crust has fully risen, and it's time to get it out on the pans in the other room. Now, I use 2 big bar pans, and Detroit style is typically in a rectangle shape because you want your crust to go all the way out to the edges, and then your cheese will kind of get that crispy, crackly texture because it's all the way up to those edges that come up on the side. Now, you could make it similarly on a round pizza stone if that's what you have, but you're going to get a better texture overall on your final outside edges if you make it in something with sides. So I divided my crust out into 2. I always do a double batch. And then my plastic wrap here is the exact right size to go over my crust. I would love to get away from plastic wrap in theory, but every time I use something different, I find that the crust doesn't stay as hydrated as I would like. So if you have any tips on making it work without the plastic wrap, I am all ears. I hate plastics, and I use very, very, very few of them in my kitchen, but this still remains. So at this point, with the crust out on the pan, it's time to get them stretched out just a little bit. Now, in the beginning, the dough really springs back. So what we're going to do is just very gently press it out, starting in the middle. And I'm giving a lesson here to my little ones. They always love to help with this part. So pressing it out, starting in the middle and just working it out in the shape of the pan. Now with the spring back, it doesn't get very far the first time, but if you just come back in a couple minutes and press it out gently again, eventually you'll get it to the shape of the pan. It really does relax very nicely, and it isn't a hard process. This is probably one of the reasons I'm attached to my plastic wrap, because I am not getting dirty or sticky hands during that process. I can just really smooth out what's on there. Now, once the dough has risen, usually at this point I'm off doing other things. I just let this go in the kitchen. And when it's risen, I go ahead and start getting all the toppings out. Now, this is totally optional, whatever you want to do. I have one little one that only wants a cheese stick, and then others that want a full-on supreme pizza. Now, that's one of the beautiful things about making pizza at home is you can customize it to the needs of everyone. So for our cheese sticks, we're starting out with butter, and then we spread it just edge to edge completely all across. We sprinkle it with some garlic, freshly minced garlic, and then some feta cheese. It'll also get a ton of mozzarella on top, and that is all that one's going to have on it. The second pizza really takes advantage of the bounty and beauty of the garden right now. We have peppers coming in full speed, tomatoes, of course. I grew onions this summer, so have a bunch of those. And the guys in my house really love the pickled banana peppers. These are a favorite pizza topping, but also work great for sandwiches. So if you haven't pickled banana peppers yet or even grown them, make sure to add them to your list for next year. They are pretty dang prolific. I have a ton of them out on the vines right now and enough already on the shelf to last. So the rest we're just using for fresh eating. If you're curious how I keep them in the refrigerator to make them last as long as possible and be super easy snacks, make sure to check out my last upload on how I clean and prep all of my fresh produce to make it last in the refrigerator. It has really changed the way we handle everything in the fridge and the amount of fresh produce that my kids are willing to eat because it's all prepped and ready to go. I'll make sure to link that for you in the end, so just be on the lookout for that one. This pizza is going to get sausage right after the sauce. And then from there, we're just going to pile all of the toppings up. Now, if budget is a big concern for you, doing something like pizza is a really great way to use up leftovers that might be in your fridge, but also to keep the cost down. You can make this pizza crust at home for a little over $1 worth of ingredients. So 2 pizzas, $2, and then whatever toppings you have available. You can just do cheese. You can even just use hamburger leftovers or whatever's around. So this is a great way to fill up the family, keep everyone happy, and it's super budget friendly depending on what you want to top it with. Now, another way that I keep the budget low is that I buy all of my cheese in bulk. I get this in a 5-pound block, shred it up, and put it in the freezer. The one thing about that is it is so cold when you're pulling it out that I always have to stop in the middle and go over to warm up my hands in the warm water. All right, now it's time to clean up the cheese. Well, I guess there is a second problem. You just heard me mention cleaning up the cheese. When my little ones are helping me spread the cheese, the floor gets less than the pizzas, but I would say not much sometimes. They love to help, so there's always a little bit of cleanup to it, but that is part of the fun of pizza night, having everybody in the kitchen and working together. Now, I said my total hands-on time here was about 20 minutes. That is accurate even for the pizza. Making the crust is super, super easy and not very much hands-on time, although there is a couple hours worth of rest time in the middle. So keep that in mind if you're thinking about something like a pizza. It isn't going to take you a lot of individual time, but the overall total cook time on it does have a little bit on there. Now, this only cooks for about 11 minutes once it goes in the oven, and it goes in without any pre-baking. So this one does come together really fast. Another great thing about pizza nights is that it usually leaves enough leftovers to cover a lunch or a couple breakfasts, just depending on what the kids want to do with it throughout the week. I love when I can cook once and feed everybody 2 or 3 times because it really makes the time that's involved in the entire process totally worth it, as well as the budget savings that comes along with reusing a meal more than once. Pizza is one of the only things that I serve the second or even third time in the exact same fashion that I served it the first time. Everything else I go to a lot of effort and care to make sure I'm remaking because I don't want my kids to feel like I'm reserving the same exact dish. I like to give it an entirely new life. Now, here are those croissants. The meal that we're coming up to now was, I don't know if I could pick a favorite for the entire week, but it was so, so good. Fresh, delicious, and those croissants were flaky and beautiful, but you'll see more on that in just a little bit. This meal is gnocchi, corn, and arugula in a cream sauce. Now, if you notice here, there was no meat mentioned. That makes this exceptionally budget friendly, but you can add shrimp to it if you would like, which is something we actually discussed while we were eating it. And I think that would have been a nice addition, although it was really enjoyed as a meatless meal as well. So just depending on what the taste is for your entire family, you can just make it whatever you want. In my experience with a large family, there's always one kiddo who is exceptionally picky when it comes to food. I have a daughter that meets all of those boxes. She likes a very few things. She loves pizza, of course. She loves hamburgers. She also loves cream cheese bagels, potatoes, and corn on the cob. Well, today's dinner is going to combine several of those things. This sauce comes together super fast. It's cream or heavy cream cheese, and some garlic, along with a few other ingredients. I, again, will make sure to link all the recipes for you down below so you can take a look at exactly what's involved here. But it turned out so delicious and simmered down really fast. The other thing to note here is I did have my water going in the back for my gnocchi. Make sure to have that going because it won't take long for your sauce to come together and you don't want to wait on that gnocchi to finish up. As I was finishing dinner here, my husband just got home from work, so having a quick chat with him while I was getting everything thrown together. This one took, I want to say, around 15 minutes. It took as long for the water to get heated up to finish the gnocchi as it did for the sauce to come together. And don't forget, those croissants are in the oven and are going to come out right all about the same time. Now, you can use fresh corn on the cob with this recipe, but I already had some frozen corn in my freezer, so I decided just to take the corn from frozen, add it to my hot water for the gnocchi, which the recipe did suggest. And I put it in there first because my gnocchi only took about 3 minutes is what the package said. And the corn needed at least 5 to make sure it came to the right texture out of the freezer to be ready to go. While the sauce finishes up, I want to take just a second to introduce myself. For those of you who might be new to my channel, my name is Jill and I am a homeschooling mom to 5 beautiful kids ages 11 to 3. When my husband and I were first married, we lived out of state and we quickly realized that family was really important to us and we wanted to get back to where we both grew up. So we packed up our one child at the time, moved back home, and have continued to add to our family over the years. If you're interested in all things homemade and homegrown with an emphasis on efficient budget management, make sure to subscribe and hang out because I think you'll like what I have to share. Now, as you can see, those croissants turned out so beautiful. I love the dark flaky texture that they have on the outside, and the gnocchi is ready to go in. Now, this takes 3 minutes to be ready to go. So very quickly, I was ready to pull out the corn and the gnocchi, get it in the sauce. I tossed it around, and the last thing the recipe suggested adding was arugula. When I did my meal planning and shopping for this week, the grocery store I went to did not have arugula by itself, but it did have a spinach blend, which was perfect for what we were doing. So I just threw it on top, waited until everything got wilted down, and then we were ready to serve. Now, I did mention before that shrimp was listed as an option for this meal as a protein. I do think chicken would actually have been really good too. I would not hesitate to use the rotisserie chicken leftovers just like I did in the first dish with this. I think that would have been a really nice add. Something worth mentioning on that gnocchi dish is that it reheated so well that it was still super, super creamy just by adding a tiny bit of water and putting it in my air fryer on reheat. So I ate every single bit of that for lunches or anything that was left over the next couple days, and I missed it since it was gone. It was really fresh and beautiful with those bites of corn added in there, and the sauce was really, really good. Moving on to what you're seeing right now, this is a cilantro lime pork. I grabbed a huge pork tenderloin from my grocery store and portioned it up into 3 different sections. This was actually a huge savings over buying just the 2-pound pork roast on its own. So highly do recommend anytime you can buy a larger piece and portion it out, you're putting away a meal for the future, but you're also saving money today. Now, my slow cooker took about 4 total minutes this morning. I put in the big roast. I did not sear it off first. I added taco seasoning, which was my homemade blend. If you haven't checked out that recipe, I'll make sure to link that video down below. And then I also added some lime juice and a little bit of water. After that, I put the lid on, let it set for 8 hours. And the only thing left to do was shred it with my forks, which you just saw me complete. And the only thing left to do was go ahead and add the cilantro to make sure it had that cilantro flavor. Now, if this is not something that you like, leave it out. It was delicious even without it. And there are so many things that you can do with what I've made today. We're going to have tacos tonight, but a few days down the road, I made chimichangas with the leftovers. And even after that, I still had enough to put away the exact same amount into my freezer so that I can make those chimichangas again, meaning we got 3 meals out of this one roast. That's absolutely incredible. Now, to go along with it, I'm adding some guacamole. Avocados are known to have such amazing fats and be so healthy for the brain that I love to add them in for my kids anytime I can, and they absolutely love guacamole. I'm not sure I could ever make enough to keep them fully satisfied, but that's the beauty of using it as an appetizer because it's definitely not the main course. Now, talking budget, every meal that I made for you today averaged right around $12. I should also add that wasn't the price that I paid because I am a huge bulk shopper, but those are the retail costs associated if you went to the grocery store and picked up all the products that you see me use today. That is absolutely amazing when you consider that I got several extra meals out of the pizza. I got several extra meals out of the cilantro lime that you're looking at here, and I got a lot of meals out of that gnocchi. So this is something you can do on a budget. You can feed your family fresh, healthy foods, even when time is short, without hitting the drive-thru. So I want to thank you again for stopping by my kitchen today, and thank you again to Wild Greens for sponsoring today's video. Don't forget to use the link in the description below to save both time and money when you take $30 off your first box. Thanks for stopping by my kitchen, friends, and I'll see you back soon.